after the close. You saw a mixed bag of earnings, but the real highlight there was their Bitcoin investment. 3,318 Bitcoins bought for $170 million. So you are actually seeing a little bit of a decline there in line with that Bitcoin drop. We'll look at a chart and that in a minute. Intuit actually earnings outlook beating estimates. Investors still not hopping into the shares after the close. So you are seeing a little bit of a pullback in shares as well. And then Emily, like you mentioned, that GameStop news, the CFO resigning, definitely pressuring those shares. Over 4% of a decline there. Take a little bit of a broad step back, though, and I want to look at what happened with the major averages. Flip up the boards, and we'll look at the S&P 500 marginally in the green. We saw a few tech names be able to lift it higher, but the broad tech story is still a negative one. You are seeing the NASDAQ Golden Dragon Index, which, of course, is heavy weighted towards tech, under pressure, as well as the NASDAQ 100 and semis down for a second straight session. Flip up the boards one more time. And we'll look at the latest SPAC actually confirming their news with Lucid Motors. Take a look at that 1 month chart, a 472% gain before today's 38% drop, really just pinning that to traders selling the news. You've seen so much anticipation in that SPAC. And lastly, we have to end this with Bitcoin, of course. That is the major risk sentiment indicator, down for a second straight session. And like I mentioned, Emily, Square just recently, right after the close, actually reported that investment in Bitcoin. You're already seeing that not work in their favor.
Right. Really interesting there. Of course, just another day. Bloomberg's Kriti Gupta, thanks so much. I want to get to Tesla now. Shares of the electric car maker wiping out their year-to-date gains. Tesla falling as much as 13% before paring some of that loss. The decline after comments by CEO Elon Musk that the price of Bitcoin seemed high. Tesla has invested $1.5 billion in the cryptocurrency. For more, I want to bring in Dan Ives of Wedbush Securities. Dan, what's your take on this?
It continues to be this double-edged sword with Bitcoin. I mean, they're diving into the deep end of the pool on Bitcoin. And right now, on paper, still a $750 million profit. But it adds more volatility to the name. And that's what you're seeing take place in Tesla over the last 48 hours.
So it wasn't just Elon Musk who said the price seems high. I spoke to Bill Gates yesterday, who cautioned against investing in Bitcoin at all. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Elon has tons of money and he's very sophisticated. So, I don't worry that his Bitcoin will sort of randomly go up or down. I do think people get bought into these manias who may not have as much money to spare. So I'm not bullish on Bitcoin. And, my general thought would be that, if you have less money than Elon, you should probably watch out.
Not mincing words there, Dan. I mean, do you think the Bitcoin investment was, potentially Tesla getting a little ahead of itself?
I think it was a smart strategic move, and we saw that with Dorsey and Square, tonight. Obviously, MicroStrategy and Saylor, and I think this is going to have a ripple effect. I think 3 to 5% of public companies over the next, call it 18 months, will have some sort of investment in Bitcoin. Now, of course, there needs to be some regulatory goalposts put in, but this is not a fad. This is not going away. It's going to start being more mainstream. And as we know with Musk and Tesla, they're going to continue to see forest through the trees. And even though this is going to add to volatility, I think it was the right strategic move, not just from an investment perspective, but transactionally speaking. And I think that that's our sort of view, even though there's some white knuckles at points today.
Right. It wasn't just Gates. It wasn't just Elon. Also, Janet Yellen making some cautionary remarks. And I wonder if that's going to change the kind of investor who's going to want to get into a Tesla or a Square, for example.
Well, that's a great point, because I think that's sort of what we're seeing today. I could tell you institutional investors that I've talked to, they're still a little cautionary in terms of Bitcoin. So they don't love maybe that investment from Tesla, but I still think the majority of investors are fine with it. It's contained. We're talking $1.5 billion, still less than 10% of the cash. I think if they start to go up to 3, 4, 5 billion, that's where it becomes more of a pronounced risk. But still, on paper today, they've made more from that Bitcoin investment than they have from selling all the EV cars last year.
Right. That is just an amazing statistic that I know you pointed out. Are there any other fundamental reasons we're seeing the decline in Tesla? I mean, you've pointed out some other things going on, them stopping taking orders of certain vehicles. How big a contributor is that?
Yeah, right now in the EV market, you're seeing a lot more competitors come in. Of course, GM, Ford, and then you go across the globe, there's going to be many automakers going, and right now Tesla's going to have a target on their back. But we're talking about a $5 trillion market over the next decade, big enough ocean for more than one boat. I think in the near term, Model Y, Standard, that not selling it, even though I view that as a small piece. The price cuts. So you're going to see a lot of the bears come out of hibernation mode. They've been there for the last year, and they're going to come out right now thinking that there's potentially blood in the water. But I still view this as a company that is going to exceed potentially 800,000 units for the year in a golden age of EV on the back of a Biden green tidal wave. That's why I still think it's $1 trillion market cap this year.
Bill Gates actually pointed out that there's an electric car competitor for almost every letter of the alphabet. That wasn't so when it comes to Tesla, came to Tesla 5 years ago. And I wonder, do you see any of these competitors emerging as, truly formidable forces? Could they take a significant share of the electric car market away from Tesla?
Yeah, I think that's starting to maybe go into the risk